The fluorescent lights of Courtroom 3B hummed with their usual monotonous buzz, casting a sterile glow over the worn wooden benches and scuffed linoleum floor. It was 2:47 p.m. on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon in downtown Los Angeles, and Judge Judith Martinez had already presided over 17 cases that day. Small claims disputes, petty grievances, the endless parade of human conflict compressed into 15-minute increments. At 58, Judge Martinez had seen it all, her sharp eyes missing nothing, her gavel a tool of precision honed over 2 decades on the bench. She sat elevated behind her imposing mahogany desk, her black robe crisp, her silver hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. The courtroom was half full, a mixture of anxious plaintiffs, bored defendants, and a handful of law students observing from the back row. The air conditioning struggled against the August heat, and the room carried that particular smell of old paperwork, stale coffee, and nervous sweat. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Karen Whitmore strutted into the courtroom like she was walking into a boutique, not a court of law. Her designer sunglasses perched on top of her blonde highlights, her cream-colored Chanel suit pressed to perfection, her heels clicking sharply against the floor with each deliberate step. She was 42 but carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never been told no, never been denied, never been held accountable. Her lips were pursed in a perpetual expression of disdain, and her eyes, cold and calculating, swept across the room as if cataloging everything beneath her. She didn't walk to the defendant's table. She glided, her leather portfolio tucked under one arm, her $3,000 handbag swinging from the other. The bailiff, a stocky man named Rodriguez who had worked this courtroom for 12 years, watched her with the kind of quiet assessment that comes from seeing thousands of people lie under oath. Something about her set off his internal alarm, but he couldn't place it yet. The plaintiff sat hunched at the opposite table, a 73-year-old man named Edward Chin. His hands trembled slightly as he arranged his papers, manila folders stuffed with receipts, printed emails, and handwritten notes. Edward wore a brown cardigan despite the heat, his glasses thick and smudged, his face lined with the kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting a battle you're not sure you can win. He had owned a small apartment building in Koreatown for 40 years, a modest 6-unit structure that had been his retirement plan, his legacy. Karen had been his tenant for 8 months, and in that time she had destroyed that dream. Unpaid rent totaling $4,800. Property damage exceeding $3,000. Constant complaints, threats of lawsuits, and a trail of chaos that had driven out 2 other tenants. But Edward was here today not just for the money. He was here because something about Karen Whitmore didn't add up, and 3 months ago, he had made a phone call to the LAPD fraud division that had set something much bigger in motion. Judge Martinez banged her gavel once, the sharp crack silencing the low murmur of conversation. Case number 47-8821, Chin vs. Whitmore. Mr. Chin, you're claiming unpaid rent and property damages totaling $7,800. Ms. Whitmore, you're the defendant. Let's begin. Edward stood, his voice shaky but determined as he outlined his case. Karen didn't even look at him. She examined her nails, a small smirk playing at the corner of her mouth. When Edward mentioned the unpaid rent, Karen let out a loud, theatrical laugh that echoed through the courtroom, sharp and mocking. Your Honor, she said, her voice dripping with condescension, this is absolutely ridiculous. We're talking about pocket change here. Mr. Chin is clearly trying to extort me because I refuse to live in his substandard hovel any longer. Judge Martinez's eyes narrowed. Ms. Whitmore, you'll have your chance to speak. Right now you'll listen. Karen rolled her eyes, leaning back in her chair with exaggerated boredom. The law students in the back exchanged glances. Rodriguez's hand drifted closer to his radio. What Karen didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know as she sat there radiating arrogance and entitlement, was that her laugh, that dismissive, cruel sound, would be the last moment of freedom she would taste for the next 3 decades. She didn't know that the elderly man she was mocking had spent 6 months working with Detective Sarah Park of the LAPD's Financial Crimes Unit. She didn't know that the pocket change she referenced was actually part of a 73-victim fraud scheme spanning 4 states and totaling over $2.3 million in stolen money, forged documents, and identity theft. She didn't know that Judge Martinez had received a sealed envelope from the district attorney's office that morning, flagging this case as a priority surveillance matter. And she certainly didn't know that in exactly 11 minutes, her carefully constructed house of lies would collapse so completely, so devastatingly, that she would lose consciousness right there in the courtroom, her body crumpling like a puppet with cut strings as the full weight of her crimes was read aloud for everyone to hear. But that moment was still 11 minutes away. For now, Karen Whitmore sat in her designer suit, smirking at a judge she thought was powerless, mocking a victim she thought was weak, completely unaware that the trap had already been set, and she had walked right into it. If you're enjoying watching this entitled fraudster dig her own grave, make sure you hit that like button right now because what happens next is absolutely insane. Subscribe and turn on notifications because when this judge drops the hammer, you're going to want to see every single second of Karen's world falling apart. Trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming. Judge Martinez gestured for Edward Chin to continue, and the old man cleared his throat, his hands shuffling through his meticulously organized folders. Your Honor, Ms. Whitmore moved into Unit 4B on January 15th of this year. She presented excellent references, claimed to work as a consultant for a medical technology company, and paid the first month's rent with a cashier's check. His voice grew steadier as he spoke, the prepared words giving him confidence. But after that first payment, everything changed. February, no rent. March, excuses. April, she threatened to sue me for harassment when I asked for payment. Karen let out an exaggerated sigh, examining her manicured nails as if the proceedings were beneath her attention. Your Honor, may I respond to these absurd accusations? Judge Martinez held up a hand. You'll get your turn, Ms. Whitmore. Mr. Chin, continue. Edward pulled out a stack of printed text messages, his fingers trembling as he held them up. She sent me dozens of messages, Your Honor. Threats, accusations, claims that the apartment had mold, had rats, had structural problems. None of it was true. I had inspectors come 3 separate times. Everything was perfect. But she used these false claims to justify not paying. He paused, his voice dropping. And then I found out she'd done this before. To other landlords. Other people. Karen's smirk faltered for just a fraction of a second, so brief that only Rodriguez the bailiff caught it. She recovered quickly, letting out a sharp, mocking laugh that made several people in the gallery flinch. Oh, this is precious. Your Honor, Mr. Chin is clearly senile. I have documentation proving every single complaint I made was legitimate. This building was a disaster, and I was well within my rights to withhold rent under California tenant protection laws. She reached into her portfolio with theatrical flair, pulling out a folder bulging with papers. I have photographs, inspector reports, correspondence with the city. Everything I need to prove this man is trying to scam me. Judge Martinez leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on Karen with an intensity that made the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Ms. Whitmore, I'm going to need to see those documents. Bailiff Rodriguez, please collect them. As Rodriguez approached, Karen's confident smile remained plastered on her face, but her hand shook almost imperceptibly as she handed over the folder. The judge began flipping through the pages, her expression unreadable. Edward sat quietly waiting. He had been told by Detective Park to stay calm, to let the process unfold. The trap was set. Now they just needed Karen to keep talking. Your Honor, Karen continued, her voice rising with indignation, I'm a respected professional with an impeccable reputation. The fact that I'm even here, wasting my valuable time on this trivial matter, is insulting. Perhaps Mr. Chin should focus on maintaining his properties instead of harassing successful tenants. Judge Martinez looked up from the documents, her eyes cold as steel. Ms. Whitmore, I'm going to ask you a very simple question, and I want you to answer it carefully. What exactly is your current occupation? Karen's smile froze. Just for a moment. Just long enough. Karen's perfectly painted lips curved into a practiced smile, but her eyes had gone sharp, calculating. I'm a medical technology consultant, Your Honor. I work with healthcare facilities to optimize their equipment procurement and maintenance systems. It's quite lucrative, actually. She said it with the ease of someone who had repeated the lie 100 times, her voice smooth as silk. Judge Martinez didn't blink. And which company do you consult for? The question hung in the air like a blade. Karen shifted in her seat, adjusting her Chanel suit jacket. I'm an independent contractor. I work with multiple clients on a project basis. It's the nature of consulting work, Your Honor. Flexibility, autonomy. I see, Judge Martinez said, making a note on her pad. And you have documentation of this employment? Tax returns, business licenses, client contracts. Karen's laugh came out just a beat too late, just a pitch too high. Your Honor, with all due respect, my employment status isn't on trial here. This is about Mr. Chen's failure to maintain a habitable property. But Judge Martinez wasn't backing down. Ms. Whitmore, in small claims court, I have the authority to examine a defendant's ability to pay damages. Your employment and financial status are absolutely relevant. I'll ask again. Do you have documentation? The courtroom had gone quiet. Even the law students in the back had stopped taking notes, sensing something shifting in the atmosphere. Edward Chin sat motionless, his hands folded on the table. Karen's fingers drummed against her leather portfolio, a staccato rhythm that betrayed her growing agitation. I don't carry my tax returns to court, Your Honor. That's an unusual request for such a minor case. Judge Martinez leaned back in her chair, her gaze never leaving Karen's face. Bailiff Rodriguez, please pull up the defendant's background check in the system. Rodriguez moved to the computer terminal at the side of the courtroom, his thick fingers typing with surprising speed. Karen's face remained composed, but a thin sheen of sweat had appeared at her hairline despite the air conditioning. Your Honor, Karen said, her voice taking on an edge, I really don't see why this is necessary. I'm willing to settle this matter right now. I'll write Mr. Chin a check for the full amount, and we can all move on with our lives. Edward Chin's head snapped up, his eyes meeting Judge Martinez's. The judge's expression remained neutral. How generous, Ms. Whitmore. Though moments ago you claimed you owed nothing because the property was uninhabitable. Karen's smile tightened. I'm being magnanimous, Your Honor. I'm willing to pay just to end this circus. Rodriguez looked up from the computer screen, his face suddenly very serious. He caught Judge Martinez's eye and gave a slight nod. The judge's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Ms. Whitmore, I'm going to ask you to remain seated. Bailiff, please call the district attorney's office and inform them we have a Code 7 situation. Karen's face went pale. What's a Code 7? Your Honor, what's going on? But Judge Martinez was already reaching for the sealed envelope that had been waiting on her desk all morning. Judge Martinez broke the seal on the envelope with deliberate slowness, the tearing paper the only sound in the suddenly suffocating courtroom. Karen's breathing had become audible, sharp and quick. Her eyes darted toward the exit, but Rodriguez had positioned himself between her and the door, his hand resting casually on his belt near his radio. Your Honor, I demand to know what's happening, Karen said, her voice climbing an octave. This is highly irregular. I have rights. Judge Martinez pulled out a single sheet of paper, her eyes scanning it quickly before she looked up. Ms. Whitmore, according to this notification from the district attorney's office, there is an active warrant for your arrest. Multiple felony charges across 4 states. The courtroom erupted. Gasps echoed from the gallery. The law students leaned forward in their seats. Edward Chin closed his eyes, relief washing over his weathered face. Karen shot to her feet, her chair scraping violently against the floor. That's impossible. There's been a mistake. Your Honor, I don't know what this is, but someone has clearly confused me with someone else. Her voice had lost all its polish, raw panic bleeding through. Judge Martinez banged her gavel twice. Sit down, Ms. Whitmore. Now. Karen remained standing, her hands gripping the edge of the table, knuckles white. I will not sit down. This is a violation of my constitutional rights. I'm being railroaded. Rodriguez stepped closer, his presence a silent warning. Karen slowly sank back into her chair, her designer handbag clutched to her chest like a shield. Judge Martinez read from the document, her voice cold and clear. Karen Elizabeth Whitmore, also known as Karen Montgomery, also known as Catherine Winters, also known as Elise Whitfield. Wanted for wire fraud, identity theft, grand larceny, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud. 73 known victims across California, Nevada, Arizona, and Oregon. Total damages estimated at $2.3 million. Each word landed like a physical blow. Karen's mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. The color had drained completely from her face, leaving her foundation looking like a mask against gray skin. That's not me, she whispered. Those aren't my names. I'm Karen Whitmore. I've always been Karen Whitmore. Judge Martinez looked up, her expression hard as granite. According to Detective Sarah Park of the LAPD Financial Crimes Division, who has been investigating you for 8 months, you have used 17 different aliases, forged credentials as a medical consultant, a real estate agent, a financial advisor, and a nonprofit director. You target elderly landlords and small business owners, establish credibility with fake references and stolen identities, then defraud them before disappearing to the next city. Karen shook her head violently, her blonde highlights whipping around her face. No, this is insane. Mr. Chin put you up to this. He's lying. Edward Chin finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. I filed a police report 3 months ago, Ms. Whitmore. When you gave me your references, something felt wrong. So I checked. And I found 6 other landlords in Southern California alone who'd been scammed exactly the same way. The courtroom doors opened and Detective Sarah Park entered, her badge clipped to her belt, a thick manila folder under her arm. She was in her mid-30s, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her eyes sharp with the kind of focus that came from months of painstaking investigation. Behind her stood 2 uniformed officers, their presence transforming the small claims courtroom into something far more serious. Karen's head snapped toward them, her eyes wild. No, you can't do this. I want my lawyer. I want my lawyer right now. Detective Park approached the bench, handing Judge Martinez the folder. Your Honor, we've been tracking Ms. Whitmore since February. Mr. Chen's report was the break we needed. She's been operating under multiple identities for at least 6 years. Judge Martinez opened the folder, her eyes scanning pages of evidence. Photocopied driver's licenses with Karen's face and different names. Bank statements showing deposits and rapid withdrawals. Rental applications with forged employment letters. A spreadsheet listing victims by state, amounts stolen, dates of operation. The pattern was meticulous, calculated, ruthless. Detective Park turned to face Karen, her voice professional but laced with barely contained disgust. Ms. Whitmore, or whatever your real name is, you targeted vulnerable people. Elderly landlords like Mr. Chen who trusted you. Small business owners who gave you opportunities. You forged documents, stole identities, created entire fictional employment histories. In Nevada, you convinced an 82-year-old widow to invest her life savings in a medical equipment company that didn't exist. In Arizona, you scammed a retired teacher out of $50,000 with a fake real estate investment scheme. Karen was hyperventilating now, her chest heaving, her hands trembling uncontrollably. I can explain everything. There are explanations for all of this. It's not what it looks like. Judge Martinez's voice cut through the room like ice. Ms. Whitmore, I'm reading charges of 23 counts of wire fraud, 47 counts of identity theft, 18 counts of grand larceny, 12 counts of forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud across state lines. That last one makes it federal. Karen's eyes rolled back slightly. She gripped the table, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. Detective Park continued, pulling out photographs from the folder. This is Margaret Sullivan from Portland. You told her you were a hospital administrator who could get her son a job. You took $15,000 in processing fees. Her son never got a job. The hospital had never heard of you. Another photograph. This is Robert Kim from Las Vegas. You rented his commercial property for a medical consulting office. You forged business licenses, bank statements, everything. You operated for 4 months, then vanished with $32,000 in deposits from clients who thought they were buying medical equipment. Karen shook her head weakly, her voice barely a whisper. Stop. Please stop. But Detective Park wasn't finished. This is Dorothy Martinez, no relation to Judge Martinez, from Tucson. 78 years old. You befriended her at church, told her you ran a charity for cancer patients. She donated her late husband's life insurance payout. $60,000. There was no charity. You bought a Mercedes and moved to California. The courtroom was absolutely silent except for Karen's ragged breathing. Edward Chin watched with tears streaming down his weathered face, vindication and sorrow mixing in his expression. He had known. He had felt it. And he had been right. Judge Martinez closed the folder, her face a mask of controlled fury. Ms. Whitmore, you are under arrest. Before I hand you over to Detective Park, I want you to know something. Mr. Chin didn't just save himself by reporting you. He saved dozens of future victims. He did what 73 other people couldn't or didn't do. He stood up to you. Karen's mouth moved but no words came out. Her skin had gone from pale to gray, sweat pouring down her temples, soaking through her expensive suit. Detective Park nodded to the uniformed officers. Karen Whitmore, stand up please. You're being placed under arrest. As the officer approached with handcuffs, Karen tried to stand. Her legs buckled. She grabbed for the table but missed. Karen collapsed, her body hitting the floor with a sickening thud. Her eyes fluttered, consciousness slipping away as the full weight of her crimes crashed down on her. The courtroom erupted in chaos. One of the law students screamed. Edward Chin half rose from his seat. Judge Martinez banged her gavel repeatedly. Medical emergency. Someone call the paramedics. Rodriguez was already on his radio, barking urgent commands. Detective Park knelt beside Karen, checking her pulse while keeping her professional distance. Karen's designer handbag had spilled across the floor, its contents scattered. 5 different credit cards with 5 different names, 2 cell phones, a passport with her photo but another woman's identity, and a small notebook filled with names, addresses, and dollar amounts. Evidence of her crimes literally laid bare for everyone to see. Within 3 minutes, paramedics rushed into the courtroom with a stretcher. They checked Karen's vitals, her breathing shallow but steady, her pulse rapid and thready. "Panic attack," one paramedic announced. "She's conscious but non-responsive. We need to transport." As they lifted her onto the stretcher, one of the uniformed officers cuffed her wrist to the gurney's rail. Even unconscious, even being wheeled out on a stretcher, Karen Whitmore was under arrest. 6 months later, Courtroom 9A of the Los Angeles Superior Court was packed for the sentencing hearing. Karen Whitmore sat at the defense table in an Orange County Jail jumpsuit, her blonde highlights grown out to reveal dark roots, her face bare of makeup, her eyes hollow and defeated. Gone was the arrogant woman in the Chanel suit. In her place sat someone who looked small, broken, and utterly without hope. The trial had been swift and merciless. 73 victims had testified, their stories painting a portrait of calculated cruelty that had left the jury visibly shaken. Karen's public defender had tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecution, bolstered by mountains of irrefutable evidence, had refused anything less than maximum sentencing. Judge Harold Chin, no relation to Edward, read the sentence with stern finality. "Karen Elizabeth Whitmore, you have been found guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, identity theft, grand larceny, forgery, and conspiracy. You showed no remorse, no empathy, no regard for the lives you destroyed. Many of your victims were elderly, vulnerable people who trusted you. You exploited that trust with precision and malice. This court sentences you to 32 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Karen didn't react. She simply stared at the table, her hands folded in her lap, the fight completely gone from her. In the gallery, Edward Chin sat with 18 other victims who had traveled to witness this moment. His hands no longer trembled. His eyes were clear. Justice, delayed but delivered, had given him peace. Detective Park stood outside the courthouse afterward, surrounded by reporters. "This case shows that persistence matters," she said into the microphones. "Mr. Chin didn't give up. He trusted his instincts, filed a report, and helped us build a case that stopped a serial predator. Every small action matters. Every person who stands up makes a difference." Edward Chin declined interviews, simply walking to his car with the quiet dignity of a man who had done what needed to be done. His apartment building was full again, his reputation restored, and a chunk of restitution money was slowly being recovered from Karen's seized assets. The lesson was clear as daylight. Arrogance is a dangerous drug. Karen Whitmore had laughed at a judge, mocked an elderly man, dismissed a small court case as beneath her. That arrogance, that absolute certainty that she was untouchable, had blinded her to the trap closing around her. She had walked into that courtroom thinking she was smarter than everyone else, and she had walked out in handcuffs, her freedom ended by the very contempt she had shown. The gavel that she had mocked became the sound of her downfall. Justice doesn't care about designer suits or fake credentials. Justice doesn't distinguish between small cases and large ones. Justice simply is. And on that sweltering Tuesday afternoon, in a cramped small claims courtroom that Karen thought was beneath her, justice was served with devastating precision. That's how a $4,800 rent dispute became a 32-year prison sentence. If this story of instant karma gave you that satisfying justice rush, smash that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories where arrogance meets consequences. Drop a comment and tell me, was 32 years enough, or should she have gotten more? And if you believe that small actions can take down big criminals, share this video with someone who needs to see that justice still works. Thanks for watching, and remember, never underestimate the power of one person doing the right thing. See you in the next one.